It might be near the end of the year, but it is just the beginning of our journey in this TFT patch because there was a B patch that's going to hold us into the next couple of weeks. And I'd say it's like a medium shift according to whatever was there from last week. So first things first, let's go over the summary. We have a couple of conditional reroll comps out there and also a bunch of different forecasts. There are many ways to approach the patch right now. And I know people who have done really well get really high ranks with 1 or 2 tricking. Some people playing only AD, some people playing only AP, and some people playing Flex. Literally, I think this patch is going to be just a be good at TFT patch. So whatever comps you choose or whatever playstyles you choose, make sure you at least know the basics and then focus on your TFT. Starting off in the S tier, we have Nocturne Reroll, followed by Emissary Corki. Then we're going to drop into Heimerdinger Flex. Lots of different options with Heimerdinger and Corki. Both of these are sort of flex comps as there are a bunch of different builds and you could even combine them together. Rebel Zoe, pretty good comp if you high roll for it. I also have some positioning tech that will get you a lot of higher placements that we'll talk about in a bit for Rebels. Chem-Baron Cashout, I mean, if you get it, 500 cash out, you are going to be winning the game most of the time. Renata Reroll, I personally don't like this comp, but it is very powerful. I just feel like you have to hit too many different 3 stars. Dominator with 6 Dominators, Silco Mundo, very strong. Probably this and the Corki builds are my go-to choices for this patch. Kogmaw Scar reroll, very solid, but you need an Automata emblem. And then in the A tier, we have Family. Family dropped down a little bit. You need like an artifact item to really make it work, unless you're just one of those people who get really lucky and get 4-star buy every time. Tristana reroll, very solid. Ziggs reroll, okay. Bruiser Mundo, dropped down a little bit. Twitch is pretty bad right now, but it is good in certain spots because 6 Bruiser Mundo is just such a good tank. Blackrose Flex, still playable. Enforcer comps, okay. Only play with the emblem. Conqueror, same thing. Scrap Corki, pretty solid. I just think the other version of Corki is a bit better, so a lot of people are going to be taking your Corkis. Form Swapper Gangplank. Gangplank, I think, is actually really, really good right now. Nami's okay, not the best, a little bit worse than she was before, and then Pit Fighter Vi. In the B tier, I dropped down Twitch to B tier. Just doesn't feel that great at all. Visionary Heimerdinger. For Visionary, there's not enough frontline, and Heimerdinger really wants frontline for him to stall to stack up. Camille, awful. Zoe, okay. Form Swapper Elise. It's like a decent backup comp. Like a lot of these B tier comps, you could use them to go into other comps, but on their own, they're not like my first choice. And then we have Urgot and Maddie in the C tier. For the weird comps, they didn't really touch any of these, so this is pretty much the same from last week. The only thing that really changed is that I think Built Different and Blade Dance Aurelia are actually playable now. But let's get down into how to play each and every one of these comps. I did a little small anomaly update for most of the major comps because a lot of people have been asking what are the best anomalies to take, what are the ones you should be looking for, and like what comps can you like kind of settle on? Some comps, they don't need a specific anomaly and you just save your gold. Maybe pick one of the first 1 to 5 anomalies that you see. But I will be updating this a little bit more over the weekend, so definitely look out for that on bunnymuffins.lol/meta where you could find the full guides and check out what I update as time goes on. But starting off with Nocturne Reroll, this comp is so good, but the thing is, you need an artifact item that gives Nocturne range in order to play this. So the reason why is because for some reason, Nocturne's attack says he attacks adjacent enemies. But the thing is, adjacent here means adjacent to the unit he hits. So when he gets +1 range, like we put him over here, let's say he's attacking the Blitzcrank, it'll hit the Ambessa and the Akali. Normally, it would just hit like the units around him. So some units in the past, when they had this effect, they'd hit the Blitzcrank, but then also hit like the Twisted Fate here. But right now, if you get the +1 range, he'll hit the units around whoever he attacks, which makes him really, really good with a bunch of different artifact items. Let's go over that right now. So Fishbone's going to be one of the best because he gets +1 range. Sniper's Focus, pretty solid as well. And Rapid Fire Cannon, really, really good because, again, they all give +1 range. Rapid Fire Cannon, probably going to be the preferred here, but there's one easy way to check out a lot of the other different combinations you could use on Nocturne. Head on over to Stats Explorer and then type in Nocturne here. And then what you can do is go to items and then filter for artifact items over here. So as you can see, the most popular ones are the ones that give +1 range. And we can see already how much the average placement improves whenever you use some of these artifact items. So other good ones are going to be just a generic melee one, such as Death's Defiance, Mittens, Prowler's Claw, and you could even get away with some of the ones down here such as Spectre's Cutlass and Gold Collector. Gold Collector is mainly good because if you go the IE build on Nocturne, Gold Collector is just really good with crit builds. So that's kind of like a nice little effect there. Wit's End is good because it gives damage and it also gives him some healing, so you could treat it like the same as Death's Defiance in a way, where it's like a healing item. But as you can see, you don't need to be 100% reliant on the +1 range. There are other artifacts that work. So if you see Portable Forge at the start of your game, definitely think about going Nocturne because it's absolutely nuts. If you cannot get that, I don't really recommend playing this comp. You could play it with 6 Automata, but you definitely prefer having like the artifact items. But this is just a 2-cost reroll comp. Go for Nocturne 3. I hate Akali. A lot of people, including myself before, were saying, oh, get 3-star Nocturne, might as well pick up 3-star Akali. And I think it's not even worth it. Like Akali, even when 3-star with items, like she's just not as good as Nocturne. So I like itemizing either Twisted Fate or Ambessa instead, and also getting tank items on Blitzcrank. But in terms of damage, like these 3 on the left-hand side, probably gonna be your go-tos. So unless you have like Prismatic Ticket or more money than Jeff Bezos, like I wouldn't go for Akali 3 because I feel like she just doesn't do that much and she baits you because you end up putting items on her and then you regret it later. You're like, oh, I could have built it on the other people. But for the anomaly, guess what's going to be good on Nocturne? You guessed it, +1 range. So Eagle Eye, I think it's going to be by far the best anomaly on Nocturne. Some of the other ones are decent. Like if you don't have +1 range, invisibility is good, but if you do, then it's bad. Same thing for Last Chance. But other than that, like damage amplification anomalies or like anything that gives Nocturne more damage in general is going to be really good if you have the range build on him. Overall, pretty easy comp to play. You just need to know when to play it, which is maybe at least 1 or 2 Nocturnes with an artifact item. You technically could just hard force it with an artifact item and 0 Nocturnes, but it's much more comfortable if you have like at least 1 copy of it in the early game. Next build up we have is Emissary, Corki, and Ambessa. 2 different builds for this one. It's the Emissary version and the Sentinel version. In the Sentinel version, you could also go 2 or 4 Artillerists. I've mainly just been doing 2. I've been kind of flexing it with the Heimerdinger, which we'll go into next. But the Emissary version, I think, is the strongest one. It's just hard to get because Garen, even though he got nerfed, he's still hard to find because a lot of comps just play him because he's just the most splashable Emissary unit because he's a 4-cost tank, right? But getting 4 Emissary in general is like decently hard. But some combinations that work really well with this comp is going to be the Augment Bronze for Life. You may have noticed already, you run so many different bronze traits on the left-hand side. Like Bronze for Life is just incredibly powerful with this comp. Luckily, you don't need that augment in order to play this, but it's just one thing I want to make special note of because it just takes this comp into the next world. But to play this comp, you want to do a fast 8 because you're looking for all the 4 costs. Use Tristana as your item holder in the early game or any sniper or artillerist. Gangplank's nice because he could hold both Ambessa and Corki items. But if you ever get a bunch of attack damage items, this is one of the best comps to go for. The Sentinel version's pretty good. It's decent if you get a mix of items, Heimerdinger plus Corki, and then you just throw in a bunch of like nonsense Sentinel units. Pretty solid overall. You could also do 4 Sentinel, 4 Artillerists, but I do prefer the 6 Sentinel version a little bit more, and it's like a little bit cheaper. You know me, I often don't like going really heavy into the damage traits because I feel like I don't have enough items to put on everyone. But if you do have like a ton of items, then it's definitely well worth it. This comp is pretty good if you are able to get a Sentinel start and you don't end up finding the Emissary units. It's very easy to play this one. Emissary, I'd say, is a little bit harder to play. The front line's a little tricky because you really only have 2 tanks, Swain and Garen. Vi, I don't really count that much as a tank. She's still tanky, but just not as good as like other 4-cost tanks because she is like a Bruiser unit. And of course, you don't want your Ambessa tanking too much here as well. There are other builds of this that focus more on like Watchers, so you could definitely try those out as well. Getting like a Jace in this comp late game for Form Swapper is really nice too. So there definitely is a lot of other things you could build on top of this comp. This is just one of the few examples. Another thing I really like about this comp is that they're not really that picky. You could choose pretty much any anomaly on Ambessa, Garen, or Corki. I just pick like one of the first ones I see that is remotely takeable. Are there best in slots? Yeah, for sure. Like the health one on Garen is really nice because he gives health to the units next to him. But you don't want to fish too much for this comp here because you want to go level 9. You want to play some legendaries eventually. And it's not like a one-man show here. All the units contribute something, and it's like a multi-carry comp. Pretty much all the Corki comps kind of work like that. By the way, for items, I like having just like generic Bruiser on Ambessa. Corki, like Last Whisper plus Red Buff is a really nice combo, like using him as a utility unit. But if you need him more for damage building, IE is fine too. If you have like too many items, I like putting leftover tank items on Swain and then leftover damage items on Gangplank. For some reason, 2-star Gangplank is like an absolute crank. Probably like one of the best value units in the game in my opinion. And he's also like a 3-trait unit, so he's very versatile. If you have no upgrades in the mid game and you're like, oh, who should I itemize? Like sometimes Gangplank's pretty good. And even in the late game, if you get like 5 billion items for some reason, I've seen him do as much damage as some of the 4-cost units, oddly enough. Next build up we have is Heimerdinger Flex. Very similar build to the one we saw before, especially the Sentinel version down here. It's like pretty much the exact same build. And there's also the Academy version up here. I kind of like the Academy version a bit more, especially with Academy emblem. I feel like Jace is just so good, but obviously getting a legendary unit for the trait you're going for is always going to be good, so maybe that's like a useless thing to say. But my favorite part about this is when you go Academy, you get so many different items that all the carries you want to itemize are very easy to itemize. And then you could just focus on like combat augments after that, or econ augments to even hit the comp. But in this comp, like Illaoi or Heimerdinger are going to be the 2 anomaly targets. And as for specific ones, on Heimerdinger, you want any mana anomaly, and for Illaoi, you pretty much want any tank anomaly. And if you do end up getting a legendary such as Rumble, Malzahar, or Jace early on, you could always put the anomaly on them too. For example, my favorite one for Malzahar is going to be Touch of Winter. That's the one that stuns the unit adjacent to whatever unit he kills, and he kills a lot of units because he has this giant AoE, so he always gets like some form of assist. And he also spreads the chill effect really, really well, and there isn't many forms of chill in this set, so that's probably one of the only ways to get it that I can think of off the top of my head. But if you ever get Sentinels early with some AP items, you definitely have to be considering this comp. It's not the strongest comp in the game in the sense that like Heimerdinger doesn't like give you the win. Like some people when they play a 4-cost comp, they get a 4-cost tank and 4-cost DPS unit and they're like, oh, like yeah, that should like do well, right? Not always the case about this comp. This comp really wants to play around like legendary units and uses the base comps that you see here to kind of get there. Luckily, you could use a lot of different legendary units because we mentioned like 3 of them here. You could also use a bunch of the 6 costs, and it's really good for that. Next build up we have is going to be the Rebel Zoe build. Some people just hard force this comp every game, and they play it without the emblem. For me personally, I only like playing it with the emblem, but to each their own, you know? Everything I'm saying doesn't really matter unless you hit Jinx early on. So if you are a god, you hit Jinx at level 8. If you had a huge win streak in the early game, you could go level 9 and hit Jinx there. So I really would only play this comp if you are on like a big econ augment such as Scuttle Puddle, which is from Jinx, gold subscription, or if you get a Rebel start with like a giant econ augment early on. Because without Jinx, this comp is absolute garbage. We could check here, 7 Rebel, type in Jinx, exclude her. Yeah, you're gonna be looking at a 5.71 average placement, which is pretty bad, right? Like that's not very good. Like I'm not even kidding here, right? Like look, we're gonna delete her and we're just gonna see how regular 7 Rebel does. It goes from 5.71 to 4.28. So if you are a god and you hit Jinx every time, go for this comp every time. If you're not a god, then obviously like, yeah, you need to hit Jinx is what I'm trying to say. None of the other units matter that much, and 1-star Jinx is good enough. At 1-star Jinx is 4.82, which again, isn't the best thing ever. Does changing the ranks do anything? Diamond plus 5.02, like, you see what I mean? This comp is really reliant on getting like everything going for you. So it goes from either like a 5.0 to a 2.7. So it's really dependent on how much you can high roll with this comp. It's literally like a go big or go home. Like literally in Diamond Plus, you go from 6.0 without Jinx, 5.0 with Jinx 1, and then 2.74 with Jinx 2. But obviously if you get other stuff such as 6 cost, Rebel emblems, sometimes you could even get to 10 Rebel, it's going to be good. But I have had some of my friends play this comp and they're like, hey, this doesn't really work. Why is it not working? It's because they don't have Jinx. So in order to maximize your chances of getting her, you need to have tremendous econ, stabilize on level 8 if needed, and then go 9, roll like 50 gold to try to get Jinx, maybe get her off Carousel, because it really is that important. But as for items, generic tank items on Illaoi is good. I prefer having the pure tank items such as like Warmogs, Bramble, Declaw, Stoneplate, Steadfast Heart, things like that over stuff like Ionic Spark and Sunfire Cape. But sometimes you build Sunfire Cape and Ionic Spark in the early game to save HP because, again, you want a win streak with this comp. For the backline on Zoe and Jinx, Spear of Shojin going to be the best item on both of them. But apart from that, like any attack speed item is really good on Zoe. So like Rage Blade, Red Buff, any AP items good on Zoe, such as Rabadon's Death Cap. I find myself building Jeweled Gauntlet a lot on Zoe because I don't really like Glove that much in this build. Guard Breaker on Jinx is pretty good, but most people don't build a Guard Breaker early on in the game. So with the Glove, Steadfast Heart or Jeweled Gauntlet, pretty nice to just like kill the component. But apart from that, you can pretty much use every other component very, very easily. All the swords go on Jinx, all the attack speed go on Zoe. Tear and rods go on Zoe. You want a Shojin on Jinx, and all the tank items go on Alawi. But yeah, this comp is very go big or go home. But if you do get it, it's going to be really nice. Next build up we have is Chem-Baron Cashout. Speaking of go big or go home, this is an even bigger go big or go home comp. Only do this if you can get to a 500 Cashout. So if you get 3 Chem-Baron on stage 2-1 with the War on the Undercity augment, which is the Chem-Baron specific augment, then yeah, you could start stacking it and get to 500 in most cases, if you have 3 Chem-Baron from the start. If you get an emblem from like Wandering Trainers or whatever you have, you could also play this comp and get to 500. The most important thing you do when playing this comp is making sure you actually lose in the early game. So we could clear this, type in Chem-Baron here. In the early game, you're probably going to be running something like this, some combination of these 4 units plus something else. I want you to make sure you lose everything, because a lot of people will try to grief you even if it doesn't make sense for them. Like I had a person try to grief me in the early game and he ended up going 8th, but even if he did grief me and was successful, he'd go 7th. So it's like I don't even know why people are griefing all the time, because sometimes it actually is worth it, but not in every case. But they'll do it anyway, so you have to be very careful. So do something like this, like backline all your melees, frontline Renata, make sure Renata dies right away. Another thing you could do to make sure you lose is kind of trap a melee unit in the back with range units. Like let's say you are playing a Morgana for Visionary. You could kind of trap your Smeech that way or whoever. Fun fact, you could also not play Visionary because we're trying to lose and just use some random range unit, maybe like a Maddie, and then put her there instead. All I'm trying to say is make sure you absolutely lose, because getting a win on this comp, I've had my Chem-Barons griefed and still was fine in some cases, but it makes it a lot easier if you just keep the lose streak, because that's the whole point of going for this comp. Other thing to note is that you want health items in this build. So Titanic Titan and Tiniest Titans are really good. I think those are the only augments that actually give health. There's another one where it's like you gain health when you deal damage to your opponents, but since you are not dealing damage to your opponents, it doesn't actually help that much in this case. That's more for other comps. But essentially, if you get one of the perfect Chem-Baron items, you just automatically win the game pretty much. Like, look at this. If we type in Perfected up here, we did this last week too, but they updated this a little bit because they nerfed some of the items. The best one is a 1.5. The worst one is a 2.5. So remember, we were looking at the data for 2-star Jinx and 7 Rebels. That was 2.78 or something like that. Like, having one of these items is better than having a 2-star legendary in a specific comp. This comp is extremely good if you can get the cash out. If not, like, yeah, you're gonna go 8th. Stacks, if I'm at 400 stacks of Shimmer and I have like 30 life, I'm gonna risk just trying to lose 2 rounds, you know? Like, getting a 400 cash out really is not good enough. You have to go for 500. But honestly, this is the easiest fortune style comp we've had in TFT. So if you are like a fortune lover but don't know how to do the transitions fast enough, this comp is really easy to do it with, because you just put the items on your Chem-Baron units, so you don't actually have to build a real board. So it's actually very beginner friendly, which I think is kind of a cool thing. Like, making a formerly confusing style of comp into a easy to play one is actually like a pretty big accomplishment. The next comp up we have is Renata Reroll. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of this comp because I feel like you need to get too many 3-stars. Like, most people do it with like the Singe Renata combo. A lot of different versions of this. It really just depends on what 3-stars you're hitting that game. Some people focus on Rel, but essentially just remember to position your Renata in the middle, to have the 2 range units next to her on left and right. That way she shields everyone. And you just pretty much play any combinations of Sentinels and Visionaries and whatever else you can find. It is a stall comp, so make sure you have an Archangel Staff on your Renata, and some type of anti-heal effect is very helpful too. But you pretty much go this if you are uncontested and have a lot of copies of Renata. Maybe you have like the Starry Night augment. That one's really, really good. And then for anomalies, getting like magic training's pretty decent, or any AP or mana item for Renata is good. Ultimate Hero for Singe is really nice also, or any tank anomaly on whoever your main tank is. But in a vacuum, it is a pretty easy comp to play. It's just 2-cost reroll plus whatever tank you hit. But this comp just isn't my cup of tea because it's not quite my style of play. For 2-cost reroll, I like kind of playing the melee ones more than the range ones, because I feel like you're less reliant on hitting multiple things. Like if you think of Nocturne Reroll, you really only need Nocturne. If you think of Camille Reroll from the past, like you really just needed Camille. But for these, you need like a damage dealer and a frontliner, and because of that, I find them a little bit less reliable. So unless I start the game off with like a Renata 2-star or something like that, or like 2 Renatas and perfect items for her, I'm probably not going to go this comp. But other people who do like this comp, they're going to go for it a little bit more often. But pretty much you'll see one of these in every single one of your games, so you have to be uncontested. Next build up we have is Dominators. Dominators I feel like are super, super good because you could play them with or without the emblem. Obviously I prefer the emblem, but they're not too bad without it, because it's essentially just like stabilize at level 8, then go level 9 for random legendaries comp, which are very straightforward to play, at least for me. So I've been playing like this for like a lot of my life in TFT, so I'm just kind of used to these types of comps. Like Blackrose from before in the previous patch was kind of like the same thing. But playing random bullcrap, going level 9, playing legendaries, 2-starring them, and getting like second place with it, those are my ideal type of games. But it doesn't happen all the time because obviously sometimes you are not able to stabilize. And we'll talk about that right now. So first things first, if you have the emblem, going 6 Dominator is so easy because you don't need to hit Mordekaiser. You could play it with Ziggs. Dominator emblem's also really good because you could put it on either a tank or a DPS unit. Just make sure they are ability power because it gives AP. For your main tank in Mundo, since not many people are playing Twitch right now, Mundo's actually not too difficult to 2-star. I know he's still hard because like other people are going Dominators as well, but if we look at like champion play rates for the tanks for 4 costs, like Alawi's going to be at the top. Echo is tanky, but I don't consider him one of the main 4-cost tanks. Elise 2.63 play rate, that's the one I'm looking at here. This shows how many people are playing it per game. And then we have Mundo at 1.8, which is high. I'm not going to deny that 1.8 is high, but for a tank it's really not that much. If we compare it to Garen that we talked about before, 2.29. Out of all the 4-cost tanks, Mundo is the least contested. So that's why I really like Dominators. Again, the only reason why this is happening is because no one's playing Twitch. So if they buff Twitch randomly like tomorrow, this comp's going to get a little worse. But right now, since Twitch did not get the New York City rap buff, he is going to be very, very bad, which means Mundo is going to be very easy for Dominators to kind of hit. So that's one thing to note about this comp. It's good because it's easy to hit stuff. Silco, no one plays him in any comp other than Chem-Baron, but Chem-Barons, you could kind of tell who's going for it in the start of the game. So if no one's going for it, like Silco's going to be free to hit too. Other comps that run Silco is maybe like the Bruiser Twitch comp if they want to run a Dominator with Mundo. He's not even the first choice as like an extra unit in that comp, but again, it's another Twitch comp, so you don't need to worry about that at all. Like, the only people that are going to be taking your units are other Dominator players, which could exist. They're probably going to be like 1 or 2 Dominator players every single game. But honestly, that's not so bad for 4-cost comp. So that's my favorite part about this comp. You pretty much hit decently consistently, at least enough to get you to level 9 and then rely on the legendaries in the late game. But again, with the emblem, you play 6. Without it, you play 4. And then you prefer adding in Blackrose instead. But honestly, you could drop to like 3 Blackrose, take out the crappy Blackrose units, and then play random legendaries in this version also. So couple things you could do there. For the anomalies, on Silco, I like getting anything that gives him mana. For Mundo, any tank is pretty nice. Compared to other comps where I say like, oh, I prefer Alawi to get the anomaly in the Rebel comp, or I prefer one unit over the other. This one, like, I don't really care that much. I just pick the first one I get that's remotely usable and then call it a day after that. It's really not that dependent on getting a specific anomaly. If you haven't noticed the pattern yet, all the 4-cost comps, you pretty much can take anything. And all the reroll comps, those are the ones where you want a specific one. But yeah, one of my favorite comps right now, because apart from the other Dominator players, you don't have to worry too much about being contested. So it's pretty nice like that. Next build up we have is Kogmaw Scar Reroll. This build is another like one of those big high roll comps. I would not go for this unless I have Gambler's Blade on Kogmaw or if I have 6 Automata. It's also a little hard to reach because you need 3-star Kogmaw plus hitting a legendary, and only 1 legendary can fill that requirement here, and you need the emblem. So again, I really only want to play this if I get Gambler's Blade early, I get a ton of gold, and then I get an Automata emblem later on. So a lot of ifs, ands, or buts about this, but if you do hit it, it's one of the best comps in the game. Let's check it out. I'm gonna take this out. Kogmaw 3-star, 6 automata. The data's a little skewed because some of these include the Nocturne games, but if we add something like Zeri, like Nocturne's not going to play Zeri, right? And you can see already like 2.23, but again, you need like 3 things going for you. So you know those like dating ick lists or like dating requirements that people have, it's like you need to hit all of them in order to get this comp, right? But pretty much having like 1 or 2 of them, not enough. Luckily, there are different versions of the Kogmaw comp, but unluckily, the other versions kind of suck. Like if we look at this, take out that, the comp already drops 1 full average placement. So you could imagine without it, how bad this comp is. So if we go to the trade section and type in like 4 automata, 3.93, not the best considering you need a 3-star 3 cost. Like 3-star 3 costs, they generally average around like 3.7, 3.5, somewhere around there. You could always check by going to champions, typing in 3, and then looking at the average placement over here. Like you want to be at least like 3.5, you know? Because I guarantee you most of the games that we saw in the last filter, they have like some crazy item combination on Kogmaw that make it work. For example, for the artifact items, getting Gambler's Blade, amazing, right? Wit's End, probably the best one on him. Lichbane with Wit's End, also amazing. And then everything else is kind of whatever, right? We can kind of check by just clicking that and then typing in Kogmaw over here to take out Zeri. But pretty much there are only like 3 insane ones for Kogmaw. Like, yeah, like Zonia is probably good. I wouldn't think Infinity Force is that good, but I guess it's okay. DFG Manazane, like, I guess if you have Artifactory, you could pick them, but if you only get 1 artifact item from like Portable Forge, I wouldn't really consider any of these. Like the data for all the ones below Gambler's Blade, these are all from Artifactory. So you can't really consider this into your analysis, right? Because you got 1 specific prismatic augment, but pretty much these top 3, if you get them from Portable Forge, like, yeah, it's doable. So again, pretty much without all these like conditions being met, it's not that great of a comp. So I guess one thing we can learn from this patch so far is that a lot of the comps out there are go big or go home, because this is what, like the 4th comp that we've looked at where it's like go big or go home. By the way, Blazing Souls is amazing in this comp because it gives AP and attack speed for your Kogmaw, and that's like exactly what he wants. I think I like this more even over Trifecta because it's that good, right? But we're gonna look at another one of these types of comps in the family reroll. Violet, while good as a 4-star, is even better if you get artifact items on her. So again, we could go back here, clear this, type in Violet, and the best ones are like Suspicious Trenchcoat and any of the melee Bruiser ones. So if we sort by average placement over here, we have Suspicious Trenchcoat. I think like Silvermere Dawn is really, really good. She's one of the best users of that. That one's over here. Spectral Cutlass, yeah, if you assassinate the backline, it's really nice. Mittens just generically good. Death Stance generically good. I don't really like the range ones. These are probably from Artifactory, but pretty much I'm just going to stick to the basics. Suspicious Trenchcoat going to be the best one. And then Silvermere Dawn, Spectral Cutlass, Mittens going to be the next choices there. So unless you're getting that or getting the 4-star Violet, you're probably not going to have that great of a time going family. Or if you get a family emblem, that would be good too. Oddly enough, compared to the Kogmaw comp where you need like all 3 of those things, going for a family comp, you only need 1 of them. So that's a good thing. You know how like we were talking about the ick list, like dating's different than family. If it's family, like people tolerate more from you, right? You could just be a person making YouTube videos, not going to any job or anything, and like people will be fine with that as long as you're not an absolute burden on everyone, right? But the 2 versions of this comp is going to be either like a Watcher version or the Pit Fighter one up here. Pit Fighter is a one that's definitely preferred, obviously. This one down here, I should honestly delete this. I'm going to do that now. That was like a much older version of the comp, which hasn't really been relevant until recently. But one thing to note about this build is that Powder is an absolute monster. Like, I've had Powder out DPS my 4-star Violet in like short fights with like 1 or 2 items because she just does her giant burst if you play like an Echo. Even without Echo, she's still doing like 4k, 5k damage as a 3-star and just blows through everything. Like Powder is definitely like one of the perfect little siblings. Like you don't need to give her much and she'll just completely rock everyone. Meanwhile, the older sibling gets all the resources and sometimes they carry, sometimes they don't, right? All in all, like if you get Violet 2-star early on in the game, you can consider going family if you want to play the 4-star lottery, which is essentially getting her 4-star anomaly. If you like gambling, which I don't, you could go for that. If not, wait till you get an artifact item for her and then commit to her after that. As for tank items, like Darius or Vander are going to be the perfect users for the tank items. Whoever you 3-star, that's who you throw them on. Like sometimes Vander is the main dad, but like if you 3-star other people, like I guess the stepdad has to like kind of do the tanking for you. Like Draven also takes some of the items as well. Like you really just need Rageblade on him. And then if you don't have Even Shroud, like Last Whisper is pretty decent. But essentially, it's mainly just a Violet plus a tank. And if you have the artifact items, none of the other stuff really matters. Or a family emblem. Oh, by the way, for the family emblem, the best user, I think, is actually going to be Vi. But you often don't get Vi 2-star whenever you play this, because once you hit all the 3-stars, you have no gold and you're just using everything to level up with. But if you do get Family Vi, I think she's really, really good. Same with like Family Jinx, also really, really good. If not, I just put it on Draven or Darius, whoever I have 3-starred. But if I do get a 2-star Vi, I actually remove it and then drop it onto Vi or Jinx. It's kind of funny how that works. Like the other two, like the grown-up versions of these units, I think they actually are the best users of the family emblem. Next build up we have is Tristana Reroll. After family, we kind of get into like the little bit of the more situational or like a bit worse comps in my opinion. Tristana Reroll is still a perfectly fine comp, but getting Tristana 3 I don't think is that easy. And her item combination is a little bit weird. You know why? Because she uses Twitch items. So normally these types of comps would be pretty good because you go Tristana, you build Rageblade and IE on her, and you're like, hey, if I get a lot of Tristanas, let me go Tristana 3-star. And if not, I just go into Twitch. Unfortunately, right now, Twitch sucks. So if you build Rageblade plus Infinity Edge, I'm trying to think of another unit that can actually use some of that, right? We could look at all of them over here. And it's like, from the 4 costs, it's only Twitch. And 4 costs are going to be the main types of comps you play with. Like, Corki, not a good Rageblade user at all. I guess Gangplank can kind of use this. Gangplank is over here at 3 costs, but again, is it his best item combination? Probably not. Same with Ezreal. So when you build it, you kind of have to absolutely hard force Tristana or be okay with playing something else with like suboptimal items, or be okay with playing Twitch, which is a suboptimal champion. Perhaps I'm being a bit too mean to Twitch, but really I only play him when I play Bruisers. But if you get everything going for you in this comp, it will be very, very strong. Like Tristana absolutely demolishes a lot of fights. She has like really big single target damage, and if you have Armor Pen, she doesn't really get stuck on the tanks, which is normally what happens for single target damage dealers. And also like any Emissary comp is going to be good, mainly because Emissary is kind of an all-in comp where you either get it or you don't, because if you don't, you have to play only Tristana and none of the other good units, so you're kind of griefing your bench and losing a lot of econ that way. That's why there also is like a Sentinel version of Tristana, where you pretty much just play like the Corki Sentinel version, but you focus on Tristana instead. You could also go 4 Artillerists, as you see here, but you could also do 6 Sentinel and do the comp that we saw up here and just replace Corki with Tristana. But decently solid 2-cost reroll comp, nothing too crazy going on there. Next build up we have is Dominator Ziggs. Another 2-cost reroll. I'd probably only play this if I get the Dominator emblem early and I get a lot of Ziggs. So if I get a lot of Ziggs, I keep him and go for Ziggs reroll. If not, I bail and go for the Silco build because they use the same exact items, they use the same Dominator emblem, and there are some games where you just get a lot of Ziggs. So those are the times where I would go for this. I would not just hard force this from the start. I'd just go regular Dominator and then use Ziggs as an item holder, and then if I get a lot of him, I go for it. If not, then whatever. The issue about the reroll version is that getting Blitzcrank 3-star is a little difficult, so you either have to do Blitzcrank 3 or Mundo 2. The problem is that Mundo 2-star, by the time you roll for it, sometimes he's out of the pool if other people are playing Dominators. And it's also really hard to hit Mordekaiser because, again, you did a reroll comp and then you have to go level up and look for a legendary. It's just really, really difficult to do unless you have tremendous econ. But luckily, Ziggs is pretty solid to hold you as a 2-star in stage 3, even some parts of stage 4, but like 3-star Ziggs in stage 4 absolutely is good as long as you have items for him and some semblance of a front line. Like 3-star Ziggs, 2-star Blitzcrank in stage 4, probably good enough to take you through that stage in most games. You probably only need 4 Dominator for that too, but obviously 6 is going to be preferred. Another good thing about this comp is that if you do get a lot of items, you have a lot of people to itemize. Garen for random Warmog is going to be good. Mordekaiser obviously is another candidate. Silco's another candidate. Elise is another candidate. LeBlanc. So if you do end up getting a ton of items, Dominators are pretty good to itemize because like the buff it gives, which is AP and a shield, pretty much work on everyone. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. Next build up we have is Bruiser Mundo. This is like the only time I play Twitch. I know I've been insulting him a lot, but you just compare him to all the other 4 costs and it's like, how can you not, you know? Like, let's go to stats champions on teamfight.lol and then type in 4 costs over here. And yeah, he's like near the bottom with like very low play rate. Keep in mind, like, play rate is very important. So even though Corki is 4.46 versus 4.45, like, Corki is played more than 2 times the amount of Twitch. So hitting Twitch 2 pretty much is a given. He's actually the least played 4 cost right now if we sort by play rate. Like, play rate is very, very important to pay attention to. A lot of people only look at average placement, but play rate arguably more important in some cases. Obviously, you should combine the two, but if you're only looking at one, maybe play rate's more important. And you kind of sense a pattern here when you look at this list. Tanks are going to be at the top always because everyone needs a tank. And then for the damage units, pretty much the units that only have one good trait. For example, Zoe, you only see her in Rebels. No one really plays Sorks. Echo, you mainly use him as a Firelight. Heimerdinger, I guess, fits in a bunch of different builds. But like the most played one, which is like Ambessa, she's an Emissary. So a lot of teams are playing Emissary right now. She's also a Conqueror. She's also a Quick Striker. So she's 3 different traits. She's going to be the most played. Vi is Pit Fighter. Enforcer, I guess no one really plays Enforcer. So maybe my point is kind of like destroyed by Vi. But pretty much like there are a bunch of different Pit Fighters and she's like a default that you could kind of add in. And then we get Corki for range DPS. He's going to be the most played because Scrap is very splashable and obviously Artillers is good and he fits in a lot of different comps as a good secondary carry. But for this, you pretty much only play this if you get Bruiser emblem. Slap it on Mundo. Bruisers in the early to mid game is actually really, really good. I find like Steb, Trundle, and then like Set and Renni. I find that tank combo with the Rage Blade on anyone in the backline just wins a lot of different fights, or like a Sunfire Cape up front. That's probably like one of my preferred like stage 3 boards. And then the most important thing to do with this comp is go for a tank anomaly on Mundo. He's so strong with it. It just makes him literally unkillable. So as long as teams don't have AoE damage, like Twitch will eventually kill everyone because your Mundo legit will never die. He'll have like 6k HP with the Warmogs and Bruiser, and you're going to be more than good to go. As for like Bramble Vest versus Dragonclaw, just look at your game. If there are a lot of AP players, go for Dragonclaw. Obviously, if there's a lot of AD, go for Bramble. So you kind of have to tailor that to whatever you're facing. If you're facing like a lot of mixed damage, like you could do something like a Steadfast Heart, maybe a Stone Plate. I don't really like Stone Plate in the Bruiser build though, because you have a lot of units up front and you have to put Mundo on the Experiment Hex, which is usually in the middle. So I don't really like Stone Plate that much. Redemption also very good, but I like putting Redemption on one of the other Bruisers so that they heal the Mundo a little bit. But some people like just dropping the Redemption on their Mundo anyways. But overall, very solid comp. You just need the Bruiser emblem and a Bruiser start. Enforcer Vi Caitlyn. No one really plays Caitlyn, so in terms of hitting legendaries with a fast 8 with Enforcer emblem early on, it's like not that bad. But the main issue with this comp is playing around frontline. I like getting some augments that make my team a bit tankier, because when your main tank is Loris, which is a 3-cost unit, it's a little difficult to play. Like, yeah, you could play Alawi, but then you can't run some of the other units, so it's a little troublesome there. Caitlyn's items, there's no really good item holder for this, in my opinion. Like, Twisted Fate is okay for it. Sometimes you could use, like, Zeri, but Twisted Fate can only use the Shojin, not so much, like, the AD items. And Maddie kind of falls off after stage 2. So it really has to be, like, Zeri. Sometimes you could use Camille, but you don't want, like, Deathblade on Camille, for example. And a lot of games you don't even know if you're going to hit Caitlyn. So it's a bit of a tricky comp to play. Very similar to the Rebel comp in that you need like the legendary in order to really make it work. Camille mainly holds like Vi's items, which is pretty nice. But I feel like Vi doesn't stabilize you as hard as like Alawi 2 and Zoe 2. I know it's a little unfair because I'm comparing her to 2 units when she's just 1 unit. But normally for melee carries, you expect them to do everything because they both have to be somewhat durable and deal a lot of damage. And I don't think Vi reaches that threshold quite as easily as some other units. For example, like a 3-star Nocturne, like obviously 3-star 2 cost is going to be stronger than 2-star 4 cost, but like he reaches that threshold where he can tank enough and deal enough damage to kind of carry a lot of games on his own. Unfortunately, 2-star 4 costs, they're not that good. Like the game wouldn't be balanced if they were because they're too easy to hit. So you need to combine her with other things. That's why you need to run stuff like Ambessa and also some kind of secondary carry in the back. But bit of a tricky comp. Only play this if you get Enforcer emblem early on and if you could reach level 9 to get Caitlyn. Next build up we have is Conqueror. Only do this if you get insane Conqueror start like Draven 2, Darius 2 plus Conqueror emblem, play 4 Conk at the early part of the game. Giga win streak with it. Get tons of Conqueror stacks and get the war chest. I think I've won every single one of my Conqueror games. I played like 3 of them so far this set. but it's only because I only play it when I get an insane start for them with the Conqueror emblem. And my favorite part about this comp is that you can play 6 Conqueror with almost anything, because if we look at all the Conqueror units, let's take everything else out, add in Darius. Look at all the different stuff we could kind of slot in, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different traits we could slot in with this. It's pretty nuts if you think about that. But none of that matters if you can't win streak, because getting your first win streak and getting your first war chest is going to make it easier to get every other war chest, so that's the only time you play this. Next build up we have is Scrap Corki, a little low on the tier list, not going to lie, but I think this comp is super reliable. A lot of people ask me for comps to one trick. I actually update a section in my tier list at the very bottom for comps to one trick, and also like some Exodia comps like Nocturne with +1 range, like come on, like 6 Automata, Kogmaw, like come on. And I also list out beginner comps over here, so definitely check that out when you do have questions on that. But after this Scrap Corki build, which is just like a fast 8 build, but what's really good about this is that you're not item reliant at all, because you just put scrap components on all your scrap units, which allows you to get like perfect items every time. But like you don't really need perfect items for this comp, because Echo, Corki, Gangplank, which are like the 3 main units, don't need specific items. They could kind of use anything. So what this comp is really reliant on is actually getting an early rumble so that you can get all his upgrades. The issue with Corki in a lot of times is that he always needs a secondary carry because he just doesn't do enough on his own. The reason why is because he's a damage unit, and if you look at his traits, he has Scrap and Artillerist. So Artillerist obviously gives damage, right? Gives him a bunch of AD, but Scrap on the other hand gives him a shield. I know it gives like a full item or whatever, so you could say like, oh, he turns a sword into damage, but like that's not that big of an upgrade, you know? Like every carry has 3 items, so he's actually reliant on buffing other units to help him out, so he cannot be a solo carry ever. Also, the shielding portion of Scrap like doesn't help him deal damage, you know? Like we could read it over here, no damage. So unlucky, because he always needs some sort of help. On the bright side though, like Scrap, again, if you list out all the 6 Scrap units, there are a lot of different traits you could kind of slot in. You could do like a DPS Elise, for example, put her in the backline with AP items. Echo does a little bit of damage, but he's more of like a tank unit in my opinion. Like, yeah, I've seen some builds where like you go 5 Ambusher and he kind of takes everyone out, but we're not playing 5 Ambusher in this build, are we? We're also not building a lot of Firelight, so he's not even that tanky in the Scrap build. He's kind of like a all-around type of guy. So pretty much in order to make this build really work, you need some sort of 2-star legendary to complement your team with. Luckily, there are a lot of them that you could kind of slot in, because again, there's so many different traits you could work with. But after Scrap Corki, like the comps kind of fall off a lot in terms of play rate. Like for Form Swapper, you're not going to play that often. Blackrose, you still can play. It's just I prefer the Dominator stuff a little bit more. But if you get early Malzahar with Heimerdinger, like yeah, definitely go for Blackrose. I guess this is one of the ones that I forgot to talk about. After Blackrose, the play rate does drop off. But this is just essentially like a fast 9 comp. You just play one of these boards in order to get there. And obviously you need a lot of ability power items to make this kind of work. This is a very rare reroll comp. If you do end up playing Sorcerer Nami, like just check out the build on the website, bunnymuffins.lol. When you do need to reference some of these builds, same with the B tier as well. And same with the special comps all the way at the bottom, where it's like the trait augments or like one of the hero augments, things like that. It's always going to be on the website. I'm going to leave them down in this section over here for everyone to check out. But I know the most important question everyone is asking, how am I going to be approaching the patch right now? I listed out like a little flow chart up here. So first, I'm going to check if I get an artifact item for one of the melee reroll comps, because it's absolutely bonkers busted. Nocturne Reroll with +1 range, like you're not beating that, you know? The 2-star Nocturne alone just like carries you throughout stage 3 and 4 easily. And obviously if you get 3-star Nocturne, he's going to demolish a lot of teams. Emblem comps, really good. Also Nocturne, Kogmaw, Chem-Baron, Rebel Zoe, Dominator, very good. There are probably a couple other ones I'm missing here. After that, if you don't get one of these insane starts, like what do you default to? If you have AP items, go for Heimerdinger Flex, Rebel Zoe, Dominator. If you have AD, go for any Corki build. It seems like there aren't many options, but like Corki, you could do like 5 different versions of him. So there actually is a lot of stuff to do. If you want to just one trick a comp, because again, a lot of people have been asking me that, like any Corki comp will do. I think he's just like one of the most versatile units in terms of a damage dealer in the game. And I guess you could also do like a Sentinel Flex, because there's like the Heimerdinger and Corki, they both work with Sentinel Frontline. There are a couple of other comps that do that as well. I think like Tristana does that and Renata does that. So Sentinels +X is also pretty solid if you want to try that out. But let's get on into the comments of the week. I'm making a big effort to respond to a lot more comments than I normally have in the past. So if you have any sort of question, leave it down in the comment below. There's no such thing as a stupid question. This one right here, I desperately need to be told which anomaly to choose. Stuff like this makes me improve stuff on the website because I made it more clear like which anomalies to go for, which comps are not reliant on certain anomalies. So if you have questions, like I literally will improve the site based on your feedback, because like here I list out like a bunch of different things you could take on certain champions. I also list out like, oh, you could be flexible on the anomaly for this comp. But I'm actually going to put even more info on the anomalies over this weekend. So again, check again on bunnymuffins.lol as time goes on, because this patch is going to be for like, I think 3 more weeks. Another question was, what's the rating mean for comps like 4.27? Is it win rate or is it like 0 to 5, 5 being perfect? So on teamfight.lol, I do point out the data a lot, but some people have answered this for me. It's the average placement out of 8. So if you are looking at champions, for example, and you are looking at like Victor 2.84, that means on average you're placing 2.84. So pretty much like 3rd place, which is good, right? Because average is 4.5, and you could always look at the average placement of all the games in the data set up here based on whatever rank you choose or whatever like region you choose as well. So let's say you are from Brazil and you only want to look at Brazil games, like definitely could look at that and just like add more things to the filter because there's like a lower sample size there. Like no one has hit 3-star Victor in Brazil, but globally some people have. But again, leave any questions you have in the comments below. I'll try to get to as many as I can. It could also be criticism as well, or disagreements. That's fine too. And just because I say something doesn't mean you have to do it, or just because I say not to do something like Twitch, for example, I already know there's going to be a comment being like, no, I got Twitch like 1st place 10 games in a row or something like that. I already know that comment's coming. You could leave that down there too. And like, just because I say or anyone says something doesn't mean you have to do it or not do it, because it's your life. Everything is up to you. But that's going to be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. I'm working on the coaching video. I think I'm actually going to do like a weekly coaching video session where I go through maybe like 5 viewer games every week. So if you want to be a part of that and have your game reviewed by me for free, submit your games into the form in the description down below. I'll leave a pinned comment there as well, and I'll try to get through as many as I can, like based on whatever patch we're on. I'll probably get more of like a cadence for this later on. I'm not sure what day of the week I want to post it on yet, so that's another thing to kind of consider. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.